Here we are again for our last recorded lecture in our modern contemporary time period. As today is the last day, I'm giving the end of course exams. We are going to move forward in our discussion of modern and contemporary time period. We will be looking at art. So, your learning target for today is compare and contrast modern European art to modern American art. So, in our lecture, we will look at a few European artists and a few American artists. We'll see some artistic styles that they created and some famous paintings that they did, even architecture. So, make sure that you have this written down for today, Wednesday, May 2nd. Compare and contrast modern European art to modern American art. Once again, we will be filling in the blanks, so do pay attention, do have your highlighters, and let's get started. This time period spans from 1900s to present day. There's going to be a lot of things that we will see in art and how it has changed and transformed. So here we go. Some of the things that we will look at will be new art styles. So the time period before, we talked about realism, impressionism, and a lot of isms are going to come out during this time period. Line, shape, forms, simplified, or they were abstracted. You'll see all of this in the examples of the paintings that we're going to look at today. Here are isms. This is the time period of the isms. We will look more closely at these in the art project that we are going to be working with tomorrow, Thursday, and next Monday. And you will have to pick one of these artistic styles or a artist that we might look at today and make a short, informative, educational video. Not too bad. I'll talk more about it when I see you next. But do know a lot of different type of artistic styles were created during this time period. So here we go. Remember your learning target. Compare and contrast European art to American art. So our first person that we are looking at is a European. Pablo Picasso, one of the most famous European artists in modern day. He is Spanish, and he creates an ism. He creates cubism. Cubism is exactly what it is. If you know what a cube is and how it has sides, it's a geometric shape. He uses it in his artwork. He will sketch out a portrait of a person just using geometrical images like cubes. So, the actual definition: broke real objects down into geometric shapes and forms like cubes. He is considered one of the greatest artists of our time period. He does a little bit of everything: drawing, painting, printmaking, sculpture, ceramics. So, he's a busy guy. He's kind of like a Renaissance man, someone who dabbles in a little bit of everything. He was so successful that after his death, he will leave behind over 50,000 pieces of art. Now that's going to be all of the above: the drawing, painting, sculpting, ceramics. So total, at his death, 50,000 pieces of art. Interestingly enough, in 1 year alone, he created somewheres of 156 pieces of art. So he was a very, very busy man. He will go through his own little phases. He will have something called the blue period and the rose period. The blue period, simply he's going to use blues in his artwork. The rose period is going to be pinks, reds, very warmer colors. You might not have known this, but Pablo Picasso also created the collage. Many of you have probably had to make a collage sometime in your schooling years. It's various pictures or scraps, piece of paper, what have you, to just form this very texture piece of artwork to maybe express something. So, Pablo Picasso, 1881, 1973, European Spanish Cubism, and you can see his picture right here. Here's you're going to see some of his paintings that he's done during his life. I am going to move fairly quickly because we have a lot of artists to look at today. Blue Nude, 1902. He will have his blue period first in the early 1900s, shortly then followed by his rose period. During his blue period, he was depressed, and you can kind of tell that in some of his images that he did. The rose period is going to come a little later. This is said to have been because he met a woman and he fell in love and he was inspired. So you can see the cubism, where it's more geometric shapes in his paintings. This is towards the later of past his blue period and his rose period. You can see that he is still using cubism, but it's a little bit brighter colors, more colors, maybe even a little bit more abstract, especially in this one. So little bit different from his beginning works. Alright, moving on to our next European is Salvador Dali from 1904 to 1989, and you can see a picture of him over here. He is also Spanish. He is credited with his own artistic style called Surrealism. Surrealism, the best way to kind of think about it is your dreams. He was actually influenced by a psychiatrist, Sigmund Freud, who, those of you who have had psychology as an elective, you've probably heard about Sigmund Freud and his ideas of how the mind works, the subconscious works. And a lot of Dali, his paintings are going to be, if you could picture what your dreams would look like, and then able to paint your dreams. So it's going to look very abstract, very different than anything that we have seen before. One of his most famous pieces is The Persistence of Memory, which we will see next. And all of his paintings are very dream-like states. So here we go, The Persistence of Memory, 1931, one of his most famous pieces. Look at what's going on. When we look at all of these pieces of art, think about, contrasting colors. Think about focal point, horizons, perspective. All of the things that you should have learned about in your art terminology. If you can see the clock, it's melting. There's not, there's a few strong, clear lines, but other than that, a lot of things are kind of hazy, floating. A lot of his artwork is going to be pretty far out there. For instance, you probably didn't even see this little man down here in The Making of a New Man. You just probably saw all of this up here. So do think about where your eye is going as you look at each new painting by Dali. So, moving on from our European painters, think about your learning target again, comparing and contrasting. We're going to now start our American, first of all, with a architect who is Frank Lloyd Wright. From 1867 to 1959, he is considered America's greatest architect. His mother would buy him building blocks, would buy him magazines and everything that she could as a child to push Frank into being a famous architect, and it worked. I'll show you examples of his houses. Many people who study architecture, they study him and learn his form and his technique. So Wright believed that form and function are one, that the form of a building, it should also be functional at the same time. He also believed in something called organic architecture. You're seeing an example of this in the Roby House in the Falling Water home that I'll show you. He thought that the home should just be a reflection of its surroundings, and you see that the homes just kind of flow into the hillside and the landscape, and you kind of don't even know that they're there. One of the things that Frank Lloyd Wright is famous for is his type of house, which was considered prairie style. And down here you can see the definition. Prairie style homes are very horizontal with low pitch roofs and have wide overhangs. And so you're kind of see this in the Roby House and Falling Water. So once again, Frank Lloyd Wright, the only architect that we will talk about today, America's most famous one. Here's an example of the Roby House. If you can see, it does have the prairie style. It's got the long, wide overhangs. It's very symmetrical. It's very clean. The lines. The Roby House is a tourist attraction where you can go and tour it. And so is Falling Water. Talked about organic architecture. This is a prime example. This is a real waterfall, and the house is kind of built right there on top of the rocks, as if the house just blends right in with the hillside and the landscape. So form and function, he believed, were all in one. Moving on to some of the painters that we're going to look about. Georgia O'Keeffe, 1887 to 1986, and you can see a picture of her. She's considered an abstract painter. She used form, color, and line very well. Most of her paintings are very vivid. She uses flowers, shells. She got her inspiration from out west. What happened with Georgia O'Keeffe is that she did live in the city. She painted a lot of skyscrapers, and she would travel out west during the summers. And she would paint what she saw. So you see a lot of skulls in her paintings with like a rose, a cow skull with a rose. Then she goes back to the city in New York, and she falls in love, and she ends up marrying and staying in the city. But she would always travel back to the west. After her husband passes away, she will actually move out west to Arizona, spend the rest of her years there painting the images that she saw in the desert. So she loved the landscapes of the West. She used vivid colors, painted up-close images of flowers, shells, and leaves. And a lot of people have said that her images of these flowers are very sensual because of their curving lines and their vividness. When you look at some of her paintings today of the flowers and shells and leaves and whatnot, a lot of people tend to think of them as sensual or even sexual. Art is up to the person viewing it.